On today's show, the Ottawa Senators have announced two key hires to their front office. One was expected, the other a surprise.
And we continue with our season review, looking at the second line and in particular, how Dylan Cozens fits in moving forward.
This is Drake Batherson, and you're listening to the Locked On Senators podcast.
You're Locked On Senators, your daily podcast on the Ottawa Senators. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome. You are locked on to the Ottawa Senators, the only daily podcast covering the Sens. On the outskirts of enemy territory, I'm Ross Levitan, alongside Brandon Piller up in the Blue Mountains. Today is Friday, May 16th, and Pilsy, happy Blue Team Elimination Day.
Yeah, I mean, it's a happy day for all Sens fans. A little different this year, seeing as the Leafs knocked the Sens out in the first round. It doesn't have that same feeling to it, but it's still an opportunity for Sens fans to get their hate on and go Cats, go Matthew Tkachuk.
There's two things I root for in the National Hockey League. The Ottawa Senators to win, first and foremost, and secondly, the Leafs and Habs to lose as many games as possible. So sure, it's a little more bittersweet this year, and sure, Leaf fans can certainly reply to us saying, wow, you guys are pathetic. You're cheering against the team that just knocked you out. You don't have a leg to stand on, but I do have a keyboard to type on, and I will certainly be watching the funeral very intently tonight down in Florida. You were saying the Leafs haven't won in Florida in years.
I don't know about years, but I think it's been 6 straight road losses for the Toronto Maple Leafs in Florida. So it'd be great to make it a nice even 7. We love the number 7 on this show.
Yes, we do. And hopefully Brady Tkachuk is leading the Ottawa Senators past the first round next season. We got some off-ice news yesterday with the Ottawa Senators. 2 hires announced off the ice. The one that is not much of a surprise is Matt Turek, who has been appointed the general manager of the Belleville Senators. Turek will also oversee a player personnel role with the organization as a whole. Turek was formerly with, you guessed it, Michael Andlauer's Brantford Bulldogs, also the Hamilton Bulldogs back when Steve Staios was there. But Pilsy, we even talked about that on our pre-show meeting yesterday because Brantford announced their changes within the organization with a new GM coming in. Obviously, they changed ownership last year, the Hyman family buying it off of Andlauer, but this feels like it was all but done a while ago. Bruce Garriock reported that Turek was in the Senators' management box during the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like one of those worst kept secrets, Ross. Not only did Turek and Andlauer have the Bulldogs connection, but Turek was also an amateur scout with the Montreal Canadiens from 2017 all the way to 2023, which obviously Andlauer, minority owner in the Habs. So clearly they had a strong relationship. And look, I go back and forth on things like this, Ross, where owners, general manager and coaches have their guys and they're loyal. I was going to say loyal to a fault, but that's not the right way to word it. Just loyal in general. And you're like, well, this guy used to work with this guy, so he's going to hire this guy. And it's one of those things, Ross, where in business, it's comfortable to be like, I know this guy. You got to work with people you know and trust. And clearly, Michael Andlauer, Steve Staios, Travis Green, they have those types of thoughts where it's like, I want my guys that I know I can trust. And Turek, as soon as he was available, it seemed like it was obvious that he was going to be a part of this executive staff one way or another.
Well, what I like about the hire is that these guys have all won together in the Ontario Hockey League. It's not like they all just worked together and didn't make the playoffs and just kind of went about their business. These guys built a winner together, and a sustainable one at that, with 2 championships in the Ontario Hockey League. So from that standpoint, like, I get what you're saying, but I also think that in any sort of business that you're going to bring people around you that you know are successful and have mindsets. The
results are there.
Exactly. Yeah. So I like the hire of Matt Turek, and he's got a lot of experience, not only as a scout, but director of player personnel was his role with the Hamilton Bulldogs when Steve Staios was the GM. I laughed when you said worst kept secret, though, because I think Steve Staios was the worst kept secret when Andlauer bought the team. It was only a matter of time before he came to town.
Yeah, I mean, that was very obvious too. So, hey, They're bringing the band back together. What is this? The Hamilton Senators now?
Yes, this is the Hamilton Senators. Well, or is it the Hamilton Belleville Senators? Because how do you find the role here? Because this is all but certainly replacing Ryan Bonus in the power structure. Brian Bonus, though, was considered the assistant GM in Ottawa, whose role was to be the GM in Belleville. Now they've got just one guy, one team, it feels like. Obviously, he'll have discussions about players in the National Hockey League, a sounding board, if you will, but his role is in Belleville.
Yeah, and I think that might be done on purpose, leading to a different move. Ross, you'll remember Rob DeMaio was brought into this team. He is the director of player personnel, but we could see a situation where he is then elevated to assistant or associate general manager, whatever you want to call it, just to kind of bolster that front office, which for years, Ross, was so thin. Pierre Dorion was doing literally everything. So it's good to see that Michael Andlauer and Steve Staios are bringing in a proper team to support everything that they need.
And that wouldn't be off the beaten path when it comes to Rob DeMaio, who was the GM of the San Diego Gulls and assistant general manager for the Anaheim Ducks when he came to Ottawa. So in terms of the hierarchy of a franchise, kind of took a step back, being hired as the director of player personnel and the director of professional scouting when he came to the Ottawa Senators organization. So it'll be interesting to see how the hierarchy shakes out. I got an OHL source here, though, asking about Matt Turek, saying that he's a smart guy and that he got jobbed by the Hymans after they took over in Brantford. He was one of the top GMs in the league, but the Hymans wanted total control over player decisions. So there you go. And it's kind of similar. If we look at it from that point, the Hymans have their guys. It's just within the family. So how can you fault them for that? They bought the team. They want to control it how they will. But the results showed that Matt Turek did a great job with them. So I think it's just another smart guy. And what I also like is it's an outside voice now coming into the organization where it's a clean slate with all the players.
Yeah, it's a bit of a external familiar voice, though, Ross. Like, it's not a complete outside voice. Clearly Turek has shared similar values and principles as Steve Staios and Michael Andlauer, but it is a fresh new perspective getting injected into the group. But Ross, unless you have more to say about this, that wasn't the only hire the Ottawa Senators made.
No, the transition I was going to do is that we look at outside voices. Well, how about an outside voice that got an inside the dressing room look at the Belleville Sens last season? Sam Gagner, who was signed to a professional tryout midway through last season with Belleville, looking to make a comeback for what would have been his 18th NHL season, couldn't get that NHL contract, but had 10 assists in 19 games with Belleville. He has been hired as the director of player development, taking over for Sean Donovan. It looks like there's been no announcement about Sean Donovan. However, his name is no longer on the Senators website. So that's been a long time rumor. Sam Gagner will take over in that role. And I love the fact that he has had a firsthand look, practice habits, everything about all the players in Belleville. I think that Michael Andlauer, this reading between the lines, I think he was pretty upset that Belleville couldn't make the playoffs this year.
And Ross, not to change the narrative of it, but not only a first hand look at the players in Belleville, but the coaching staff and the franchise in Belleville as a whole, right? Like, I wonder if when they brought him in, they kind of said, hey, look, we know you still got some logs on the fire playing wise. We'll give you an opportunity. We need a veteran, and there's so many injuries throughout this lineup that we just need players, period. We'll give you a chance here. Try to make a push for one last crack at the NHL. But I wonder if they both kind of mutually agreed, hey, at the end of the season, no matter how it works out, we've got a job for you here. And I wonder if that was predetermined or not.
It gives me the same vibe that it did when Jacques Martin took over for when he did, where it's like he came in, he saw what needed to be changed, let's say, within the room, within the culture, and then made moves or at least suggestions to the group internally. So I think that he's going to be an enormous hire. And for those saying, hey, that's a pretty important role, director of player development, for a guy who's just finishing his playing career, Well, Sam Gagner has long been in the player development game too. He's been running pro skates in Muskoka since about 2016, and in 2020 actually made it into a pro and a kids camp. So he runs a group called Muskoka Hockey, and every summer they have dozens of National Hockey League players coming in for their pro camps. They've also expanded now to have camps for under 10, under 14. They've got their elite academy for up and coming players. And then, of course, their pro camp where guys like John Tavares, Bo Horvat, all the guys who have their summer homes up in Muskoka go and train. This is a highly respected player in the National Hockey League, Pillsy. Like, he jumped in at 18 years old and ended up playing 1,043 National Hockey League games. So I'm extremely happy with bringing in Sam Gagner to the organization.
No, it's a great move, Ross. Like, getting a player that's played as long as he has. And the kind of interesting about Sam Gagner too is that through his long career, he played on a lot of different teams. So he has so many different perspectives. He has so many different connections throughout the hockey world. He's seen so many different crops of young rookies, young prospects on different organizations. And like we mentioned, he's got the inside info on where this team is at with some of their prospects in Belleville as well.
Trivia time. How many of Sam Gagner's former teams can you name? Your hint is that he played 17 years in the National Hockey League and played for 7 organizations.
Okay, well, are we counting Belleville, Ottawa?
NHL.
Okay, I'll try to work backwards then. I know he was in Winnipeg.
Correct. 1.
Detroit.
Yes.
Did he play in Toronto?
Nope.
No.
Okay. I think he played for the Marlies, actually.
Okay. I remember seeing him in that jersey. Well, Edmonton, obviously.
Yes. 3.
Columbus.
4. You're missing a team he played 2 years with.
Vancouver?
Correct. Vancouver. 5. I don't think you're going to get the last 2. Although
Arizona.
Okay, 6. Okay, And now the other one he played 1 year with, and he had 50 points in 81 games.
Wasn't that Columbus?
Yes, Columbus.
No, I said Columbus. I already got Columbus.
So then who did you miss?
Anaheim?
Oh, I know who you missed.
Anaheim?
No. He was a teammate with a current Senator.
Philly.
Bang.
Oh,
7 for 7, Pillsy. Let's go.
There we go. I mean, I promise I was not looking directly at it when you asked it, but I have recently flipped through Sam Gagner's stats, so it was kind of fresh in my mind.
Speaking of Sam Gagner's stats, since the Ottawa Senators became a team back in 1992, Sam Gagner is the only player in the NHL with an 8-point game. 8 different players have had 7 points in a single game. Only one has had 8. Sam Gagner against Chicago in 2012 had 8 points, 4 goals, 4 assists, and 7 of those 8 points were at even strength, Pillsy. That was ridiculous. So a very respected NHLer.
Yeah.
You listed off all the teams. He's played with everybody. He's been coached by everybody, and he's seen it all. So really excited to have Sam Gagner as a part of the development team for the Ottawa Senators. It kind of feels like a hire that the Leafs would do, where it's like a highly respected guy right off his career. They get him into player development. Heck, that's how Steve Stais got his start in player development. But I like that it's Ottawa now who's able to attract these types of people into the organization.
That would be a guy I would love to get on the show, Ross.
Yeah, we'll work on it for this summer for sure. Because Sean Donovan was our first ever interview, Making Sense of Sens.
Yep, where we brought cameras and pointed the cameras away from him. And he was like, "What are we doing here, boys? We're all wearing suits." And we pointed the cameras away and we're like, "Oh, it's just an audio interview." And he's like, "So what's with the suits and the cameras?" We're like, "This is the only way we know how to record audio."
Suits is dress for the job you want, not the job you have.
Yeah.
And yeah, we didn't know how to do an audio interview without having it plugged into a camera. So
yeah, I think once he saw that, he's like, "What did I sign up for here?" And it was in the concourse of where
the Marlies play, because they were doing their rookie tournament. Yeah. And I'll never forget after the interview, he goes, "Your questions were a lot better than I thought they'd be."
Hey, there we go.
And we knew that 5, 7, 8 years later.
Yeah.
we would be your team every day. Shout out to the everydayers here, making us your first listen each and every day. Player and reviews next. And Dylan Cozens, to me, super interesting how he came over from Buffalo and signed long-term. What should expectations be moving forward for him? David Perron, Drake Batherson, also to be discussed. You're listening to Locked On Senators, your team every day.
Today's episode is brought to you by our friends over at Game Time. The Stanley Cup playoffs are here, and if you've never been to a live NHL playoff game, take it from me, who experienced my first action of NHL playoffs. It's unlike anything else. The intensity, the speed, the energy in the building, it's all next level. And thanks to Game Time, getting in the door is easier and more affordable than ever.
It sure is. And I got my tickets for game 2 in the Winnipeg Stars series on Game Time. I waited until the day of. My wife's like, wait, you haven't gotten tickets yet? Are we going to be okay? And I said, don't worry. Not only do we have the Game Time app where prices did go down, I saved $30 USD on each ticket in the end of the day. Great seats too. I also got $20 off because I used code LOCKEDONNHL with a new account.
There you go. So be like Ross and save some money on your tickets, and not just for sports, comedy, concerts, theater. Turn on the all-in pricing so it shows the total cost up front. No surprise fees at checkout. The app shows you panoramic seat views, and with Game Time ticket coverage, I know I'm protected, whether it's cancellation protection, job loss assurance, or their 24-hour guarantee. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed.
Today's episode is also brought to you by Farm to Fork. If you're a fan of premium, locally farmed meats delivered directly to your door, I've got some great news. Farm to Fork makes it easy to get high-quality steaks, air-chilled chicken, wild-caught seafood, and more, all with no antibiotics, hormones, or GMOs. Plus, everything comes flash frozen right from the butcher's table and individually packaged for your convenience.
And Ross, I'm on the website right now, and the WTF value box for $1.99, you get boneless, skinless chicken breasts, chicken wings, burgers, ground beef, pork chops, applewood smoked bacon, Italian sausages, and that's all flash frozen for peak freshness. But Ross, I know you're eyeing the ribeyes on the website.
Eyeing the ribeyes. How about 12 ribeyes for $3.39? That is a fantastic deal. You can just pull them out of the freezer individual at a time and get your grill on this summer thanks to Farm to Fork. They're delivering all across Ontario and Western Quebec. The best part, delivery is free with a minimum order of $1.99. You don't even have to leave the house to get this quality. But if you are out and about, you can head to their market. It's on Carling Avenue, 1578 Carling Avenue. You can go there and go chat with Derek. Awesome guy. Individual meats. You can get them in bulk. It is all for you there. Farm to Fork Delivery. Shop local, shop Canadian, shop at farm2forkdelivery.ca. That's farm2forkdelivery.ca. Promo code LOCKEDON40 gets you $40 off your first order at farm2forkdelivery.ca. All right, Philzy, as we wrap up our conversation on newly appointed Belleville Senators General Manager Matt Turek and Sens' new Director of Player Development Sam Gagner, just remember, the name Gagner translates to win in English.
Winner. Gagner.
No, yeah, there you go.
Everyone knows that sound if you've been in a convenience store in Ontario.
You certainly do. Okay, Pilsy, a guy who just started learning that sound. Dylan Cozens, the workhorse from Whitehorse, played the first number of seasons of his career with the Buffalo Sabres after being drafted 7th overall in 2019. And after those 4.5 seasons with Buffalo, it felt like it was time for a change of scenery. You look at Sabres Twitter, everybody disappointed with how that went. He had one amazing season, 31 goals, 68 points for 68 points in 81 games. And he didn't follow it up the same way. 47 points the next year, and then only 31 points in 61 games, -13, before being traded to Ottawa alongside Dennis Gilbert and a second-round pick in exchange for Josh Norris and Jacob Bernard-Docker. How were your first impressions of Cozens after coming over to Ottawa?
This guy made an incredible first impression, Ross. Like, when he got here, the Ottawa Senators needed a boost. Steve Staios needed to make a big move. And in his first 4 games, he got points and wins. The Ottawa Senators won their first 5 games with him on the team. He scored some big goals, and he really fit in on that second line alongside David Perron and Drake Batherson.
Yes, he did. And they clicked instantly and at 5-on-5, which I think is the most important part of this whole storyline, because that was a place where the Senators had struggled. It took him 1 game to match Josh Norris's 5-on-5 assists for the season. 1. And he did that in style during that comeback win against the Rangers, where Brady had the OT goal late. He finishes his Senators portion of the season with 21 games, 5 goals, 11 assists for 16 points. He was a -4, had 6 penalty minutes alongside it. In the playoffs, there were some doubters, I would say. He didn't have the best series. That Game 2 overtime goal where, you're looking at Batherson for the giveaway in the offensive zone, but it was a flyby from both Cozens and Batherson at the defensive blue line that really allowed Domi to step into it. Now, how different is the narrative in the playoffs around Dylan Cozens if he buries that opportunity at the end of Game 2 in regulation? He was wide open in the slot, and he put a good shot on goal. Stolarz had to make an elite glove save to stop that one. So unfortunate that the playoffs didn't necessarily go the best for Cozens. Now, he did have a moment. The shorthanded goal in Game 5 that put them up 2-0 with 10 minutes left was enormous, facing elimination. So I think that overall, a very, very solid start to his Senators career. I do, however, think he can be better and more consistent with a full training camp and a full season with the team.
Yeah, and keep in mind, Ross, that was Dylan Cozens' first experience in the playoffs as well, right?
Yep.
Coming over from Buffalo, so it was something new for him too. He's had really good showings internationally. You remember him from the World Juniors. He was the captain in 2020, 2021, where he had 16 points in 7 games. And then World Championships, he's been a point per game guy with Team Canada as well. So it's nice that now he got to experience some playoff hockey. That's actually where him and Drake Batherson at the World Championship had a lot of chemistry. And Dylan Cozens moved in with Drake Batherson when he got here, and they were line mates, and they were a dynamic duo together on the ice. So I think now that he kind of knows he's going to be the second line center, more than likely he'll be playing with Drake Batherson again. Will David Perron be on that line? That remains to be seen. But those two, I'm sure, will stay together. And I think with the full training camp, now he knows he's in Ottawa. It's a fresh start. He got to play in the playoffs. He's out of Buffalo, where things were not really going his way. And it seemed like him, the coach, the general manager, and the fan base weren't really seeing eye to eye anymore. I think we're going to see a big bounce back year from Dylan Cozens. And I wouldn't be surprised, Ross, you mentioned his best season. I wouldn't be surprised if he gets back to that 30-30 goals assist mark again.
If he gets to 30-30, the Senators are in a great spot for next season. And look, I get that him and Drake Batherson had that immediate chemistry right off the bat. I wouldn't be so quick to say that that's guaranteed to be what we start next season with. Look, like,
what do you mean?
I think the eye test did a lot better than the numbers for that, because they did produce a bit. They played 201 minutes together, and Cozens only played 59 minutes away from Drake Batherson with Ottawa during the regular season at 5-on-5. Now, together they had 10 goals for, 10 goals against, an expected goals percentage of 43.3, and that's with a 50% offensive zone face-off stat line. So they did contribute. I think defensively they need to be a little bit better.
Fair. But then what? You move Drake up to the first line?
We'll get to Drake Batherson because there's a spot with Stützle and Tkachuk. And
okay, interesting.
I'm just saying, the Sens have a lot of middle six wingers, and Batherson might be the guy with the best chance of what they have now.
Batherson's not a middle six winger. He's a top six winger.
Right.
Three straight years of 60 points.
That's what I'm saying then. That of all the, let's say, top 9 wingers then the Senators have, he's probably the best one they have right now. But he's a better player than Fabian Zetterlund, right? Right now.
Not than Brady Tkachuk, though.
No. Okay. I have Brady locked in. Obviously,
Okay.
like Brady is the one top line winger that they have. Everyone else is kind of, are they first? Are they second? And some of them should they be third line wingers? But this is about Dylan Cozens. And the expectations then, are you putting 30-30 expectations on him? That's what we need from you?
Yeah, I think so. Like, in my mind, there's no reason why he can't get to that point. Especially if he's with Drake Batherson, and then we'll see who his other linemate is. I mean, maybe if it's even David Perron another year, I'm not sure. But I think now that the dust has settled, Ross, and he's going to be here for quite a while longer. He had the same contract length as Josh Norris. Dylan Cozens is signed at $7.1 million till 2030. So he's got another 5 years, most likely.
Yeah, and with that comes a little bit more expectation, I would say, because look, they traded for a guy who's 24 years old, and they believe in him to be a top 6 centerman that can play behind Tim Stützle and give you a little bit of a different look, a longer player, 6'3". He's got a right shot, which I think is very beneficial for the middle of the ice, because at one point it was all lefties with Stützle, Norris, and Greg. I know Pinto then jumps in, and I'm talking about more so when Pinto was out with the 41-game sussy. But now that Pinto's there, you got another righty. So now you got 2 righties and a lefty in your top 9. And I think it just gives you a bit of a different look up front. Dylan Cozens, I would like to see him be able, and I know I said this about Timmy, but I want all my centers to be able to play the PK. And I think that if he showed what he did in Game 5 in Toronto and can be a guy who can play in all situations, we know he's got a bomb on the power play too. That's a nice asset the Sens may not have had once they got rid of Norris. Otherwise, I think this is going to be a big year. Let's put it this way, because if he comes out and disappoints next season, there's going to be a lot of people saying, okay, we get that he's healthier than Josh Norris, but was that the right player at the right salary? You're only saving $800,000 in this trade. He has to be a similar production type player. And the production was there. 16 points, 21 games is pretty damn good, but it's a huge year. I would say there's a lot of guys that have big years. He's right at the top that needs to have a big season going into 2025-26.
Yeah, I mean, I could even like a 20-40 goals assist ratio, I think would be a successful anywhere near the 60-point mark, but
above.
Ross,
60 points is the expectation.
Yeah.
If he has 52 points, unless he's like a plus 20, if he has 52 points and he's hovering between -5 and +5, I don't think fans are going to be happy with that.
Yeah, that's fair. But just for context about him killing penalties, he was not put out there as a penalty killer. He was put out there because the penalty was expiring, and I think Travis Green was trying to get ice time and lines kind of corrected in that spot. So I know you want the big guys killing penalties, Ross. I'm on a different side of that. I don't know if I co-sign Dylan Cozens as a penalty killer. But again, like I said with Timmy, I'd be willing to give it a try.
It's going to be fascinating to see how Dylan Cozens looks coming into training camp after a full summer with the Senators organization, them getting the training program with him, and see how he can develop. And I think Sam Gagner could be a big part of helping him develop, man. I do think that he can look at a centerman. He was a centerman too, and say, this is how I found success consistently in the National Hockey League. Let us know in the comments how you feel about the immediate impact that Dylan Cozens made, and what are your expectations? Is 60 points, 30 goals, is that too high, or are we being reasonable? All right, Pilsy, that was the season in review for Dylan Cozens, albeit an amalgamated one, just 21 games with Ottawa. However, he did play 82 games, so he had a full season. If you add the 61 plus 21 math guy, that's 82 games, and he did finish with 47 points. So when we're asking for 60, we are asking for improvement from Dylan Cozens.
Yep, and no reason why he can't do it.
David Perron, the definition of getting better as the season goes on. And we have to start by mentioning it's awesome to see that his personal life, the complications with the pregnancy of his wife, has all been settled. His wife posting on Instagram just last week that the baby has graduated from CHIO, so it seems like everything is healthy and doing well with the family, and that is the most important thing. But obviously, it had to have weighed on him coming into a new organization after spending the last few years in Detroit, a free agent signing, a guy who was brought in to provide leadership and to provide another player in the top 9 that could help produce. And he didn't produce at all through the first 20 games with the Ottawa Senators. He finishes the season with 43 games played, 9 goals, 7 assists, 16 points, -7 with 12 penalty minutes. Had a good playoffs, though, and he basically started his playoffs when we talked about Brady Tkachuk saying that every game from that San Jose game, March 1st, we picked a good one to go home for, Pillsy, because there's a lot of talk that kind of turned the season around there after the 5-game losing streak. But from that point forward, David Perron was one of the best players on the Ottawa Senators down the stretch.
Yeah, I mean, there's a 20-game stretch, Ross, from March 1st, like you talked about, to April 8th, 20 games. He had 12 points and 8 goals in that stretch. So he did figure out how to find his way in this team. And he even said in his postseason presser, Ross, that when he got here, he wasn't really able to fit into this team. He didn't really know where his role was, and it was kind of a whirlwind of a move with all the stuff going on in his personal life. And then he had that back injury that put him out for a bunch of games too. So he really didn't have an opportunity for a smooth transition, I guess I would say. And then once he got a little consistency, a little stability, he turned into the pro and the guy that we expected him to be. And he's got 1 year left at $4 million, and it's going to be fascinating to see how the Ottawa Senators juggle 2 guys, 2 veteran guys like David Perron and Claude Giroux that, you know, you can still see they got it, but they're not necessarily top line players or even top 6 players. Like, ideally, you probably want those guys on your third line, and they're going to have to find roles and ways to fit these guys into the lineup that makes sense for both the team and the player.
So out of those 43 games and 16 points and 9 goals, he had 1 goal and 4 points in his first 20 games, -11.
Yeah.
It was just, the start could not have gone worse for David Perron, but I don't think the end could have gone much better. In the playoffs, he was the most clutch player on the Ottawa Senators. And we can argue Jake Sanderson scoring that OT goal. I'm not saying he was the best player, but he was the most clutch. If you look at the 2 goals that he scored, those were both in extremely key moments. In game 4, that Sanderson goal doesn't happen if David Perron doesn't get the Sens a lead in the 3rd period with that great backdoor feed from Zub, and he puts it in. And then in game 6, he gave us all that last gasp of hope when he tied the game on a beautiful veteran play, coming behind the net and banking it off of Stolarz' head and in. Like, he saved his best for last this season, and you just have to hope he can carry that type of play into training camp and early in the season, because he's admitted that his game, as it's constructed at this point of his career, does better when things tighten up late in the year. But they don't have that luxury to wait on a $4 million player. They need him to come in hot out of the gate and be able to start the season on time.
Yeah, I mean, Ross, this is a very consistent player. Like, you look at since 2016, 2017, the lowest amount of points he's had is 46 points. So I feel like it's fair to say you can expect, I mean, now we're going back almost 9 years now, the start of that range, but even the last 3 years, 47 points, 56 points, 57. So it's not crazy to expect him to get 40 plus points, which for a $4 million player, that's right in that range, in my opinion. So I think, Ross, we can expect to see David Perron have a bounce back year now that he's settled, hopefully fully healthy. I'm sure he is, and ready to go for training camp.
Looking forward to that. Let us know in your comments your thoughts on David Perron's season. Now, Drake Batherson, career high in points, has played all 82 games for 3 consecutive seasons, which I think is extra commendable after the high ankle sprain he suffered on that dirty hit from Aaron Dell that took away an all-star season to start for him. And now it's about the 5-on-5 play, right? For Drake Batherson. We know he can produce on the power play. We know that he's offensively gifted and can slow the pace of the game down to his level, and that he's shown a willingness to get more physical. He had by far his most physical season under Travis Green, and that wasn't by accident. They wanted Drake to be a harder player to play against, and he contributed to that. He was on a short list of players in the National Hockey League this season that had over 65 points and 145 hits. He had 149 hits total in this season, 2 more points than he had last year. How would you give your impression of Drake Batherson's season?
Overall, it's a good year, Ross. I think there's lots of Sens fans that, have higher expectations for Drake. But when you zoom out and look at it, 26 goals, 42 assists, 68 points. And the key, Ross, of all these stats for Drake Batherson, if you're just listening on YouTube, we have his contract in the bottom left corner. 2 years left at $4.975 million. That is an absolute steal of a contract for a guy that's had 3 60-point seasons in a row and has increased each year his point totals, and he's only 26 years old. Like, for people that are really down on Batherson and kind of want to use him as a valuable asset in a trade piece, I just haven't been able to wrap my head around that, because I don't see how you make your team better when you trade away a 60-point guy that's making less than $5 million per year.
Yeah, I get that. I feel like those types of people want a top 4 defenseman, or to get more up front. And maybe that's out
more
to
than
lunch.
68 points?
No, I think like a more well-rounded player.
Okay.
And I'm not saying Drake Batherson can't be that. We always talked about him coming up through Belleville as a 2-way guy, and then it felt like the defensive side of his game has taken a lot more time to develop. That being said, I'm of the mind that Drake Batherson could be the top line right winger on this team. It's not a conversation we've had yet, but I'm willing to start it right now because he's played well in the past with Tim Stützle. We know he's played well with Brady Tkachuk on his other wing. I know we want more speed with Timmy, so that might be where we look and say, does it make sense? But if you're looking for a shooting mentality out of Timmy, Drake Batherson is an elite playmaker, and I think that could be a guy. If they can't get a big-time, like no doubt first-line player, and we know a top 6 player is something we want the Ottawa Senators to add, I would be okay with either Fabian Zetterlund or Drake Batherson with the roster they have right now to get that first opportunity on the top line. I'm not as married to the Cozens-Batherson bromance having to be together at 5-on-5 on the ice as I think a lot of Sens fans are. I think Batherson could be with Timmy, no problem.
Yeah, I mean, I think any player could be with Timmy, no problem. It's a good guy to have as your centerman. My only concern, Ross, is if you put Batherson on that top line, it really thins out your forward depth chart. Like, because then you're looking at a second line of what? David Perron, Dylan Cozens, and Fabian Zetterlund, which is not terrible, but
how about Zetterlund, Cozens, Giroux?
Yeah, I mean, that's very similar in my opinion.
I like that better.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess put me in the category of the Sens fans that is married to the idea of Cozens and Batherson being a duo. I don't see a reason to split them up, in my opinion.
Okay, well, I think it's an interesting dynamic up front with the Senators this offseason, and Drake Batherson right in the middle of it. I think we talked about Dylan Cozens having higher expectations and needing to be better. I think for Batherson, like if he drops to 60 points versus 68, but we can finally get a plus season out of him in a full year, I think I would probably take that because I think the value that he could add to his game being a little bit better in the defensive zone. And I don't mean physically. I mean, he finishes his hits on the forecheck. Anything from the red line to the other end of the ice, he's great without the puck. Like he can strip guys too, but it feels like maybe a defensive positioning thing. Like I don't know what it is, but it feels like too many times he's on the wrong end of defensive highlights.
Well, Ross, I'll say I think maybe it's some decision making. And, this might be recency bias just because of the playoffs where he had that brutal turnover and then doesn't finish his check on Domi that leads to the overtime game winner. And then he had, I think, 3 brutal penalties in the offensive zone. One of them, a 4-minute penalty in overtime. So
in an elimination game where you can be swept at home.
Yeah, that was very stressful to be a fan in the building, I'll tell you that. But I think if he can work on some of those decision-making, I don't want to say issues, mental lapses, we'll call them, I think he can really clean his game up. And I think that has left a sour taste in the mouth of Sens fans. And I think Drake Batherson is a better player than what we saw in those playoffs, in my opinion.
Yeah, and he finally got back to scoring goals. There was a stretch this season where he just didn't score. Like it was not good. He had the hat trick against the Anaheim Ducks. If you remember that was one of the more fun games this season that the Senators played. And then basically through the middle of March, like he had 4 goals during a 36 game stretch this year, Pilsy.
Yeah, that's another thing. The consistency is an issue with Batherson, but while he had those dry spells, Ross, he quietly had some really good hot streaks as well. It just didn't seem that way because they weren't emphatic goals and maybe secondary assists and things like that.
Yeah, well, it's going to be consistency for me, the expectation for Drake Batherson next season. But you can tell the talent's there. And as you alluded to right off the bat, that contract is as good as you're going to find value-wise around the team, for sure.
Yeah.
Like
around the league, honestly, like it's one of those deals, Ross, where I know like some of the superstars that signed early deals and are in the middle of those that you can find better value. But for a guy under $5 million to play 82 games and get 60 points 3 years in a row, and as a 26-year-old, that's pretty good.
Pretty good indeed. So don't let the playoffs overcloud what was a good season. I'm not going to say great season, but a good season from Drake Batherson. Still room for improvement, but he did show some this year with the physicality. And like, what did he have last year for hits? Because this year he had 149. Last year he only had 98 in 82 games. So nice improvement there at 115 the year before that. Those are his 3 full seasons in a row coming after that all-star season that was cut short thanks to Aaron Dell. So let us know in the comments your thoughts on Drake Batherson and how he can be an even more impactful player for the Senators this upcoming season. Pillsy, any final thoughts on today's show?
Yep, I'll continue with my theme talking about Blake Montgomery and the
We want winners.
Yeah, we want winners. They are the top team in the OHL. And Ross, we talked about how they finally lost a game to the Oshawa Generals. Well, that was the only bit of adversity that they wanted to deal with because they then won 4 straight games and in big fashion, 5-2, 7-5, 6-2, and then the final game 5-2. And Blake Montgomery got back on the score sheet in the last 2 games with 2 assists, 1 assist in each of those games. So moving on to the Mem Cup in 17 playoff games with the London Knights this year, he has 10 points. I think he's going to want to finish with a bang, Ross, because we know he told us next year, he will not be returning to the London Knights. He'll be at the University of Wisconsin.
And such a beauty. Go check out our interview with Blake Montgomery. My final thoughts is that a former OG Ottawa Senator is a free agent. And that is former Flyers interim head coach Brad Shaw, who has an amazing reputation around the National Hockey League. And our friend Kadri Sens on Twitter has noted that Brad Shaw was an assistant coach on Travis Green's bench for a year with the Vancouver Canucks. So could the Ottawa Senators continue their off-ice shuffle with Brad Shaw? I would love that, man. Former Ottawa 67, former OG Ottawa Senator. Let's go. Bring him in. He's got, talk about experience coaching, Pilsy. 2 years with the Islanders, 1 year as head coach. A number of years with the St. Louis Blues, number of years with the Columbus Blue Jackets, that 1 year in Vancouver, and then he's been with the Philadelphia Flyers for the past 4 seasons. So he's been a head coach or assistant coach in the NHL since 2005, and that's after being a coach in the AHL before that. So a very experienced potential associate coach is available in Brad Shaw. We'll leave you thinking about that. Thank you for liking, watching, listening, subscribing to the show. If you are enjoying it, please hit the thumbs up below on YouTube. Leave a comment below. It does help grow the show with the algorithm. And leave a 5-star review wherever you get your podcast. That's Brandon Piller. I'm Ross Levitan. We'll be back next week to wrap up our end-of-season reviews and dive in to the NHL draft that is just over a month away. This has been another edition of the Locked On Senators podcast, your team every day.